Admiral Zara Chen stood on the bridge of her ship, the TDS Indomitable. Through the big window in front of her she could see the enemy ships. They were huge, dark, and scary. Each one was as big as a small moon. The enemy called themselves the Hegemony, and they had come to destroy all humans. Chen's hands shook a little as she held onto the metal rail. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations. Their faces were tired and scared. Red lights flashed everywhere and warning sounds kept going off. The ship shook every time the enemy hit them with their weapons. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Torres from his station. "We have lost another ship. The Defiant is gone." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. The Defiant had 800 people on it. Now they were all dead, floating in space. She opened her eyes and looked at the big screen that showed the battle. Red dots showed human ships. There were not many left. Blue dots showed enemy ships. There were hundreds of them. "How many ships do we have left?" Chen asked. 14, ma'am," Torres said. His voice was quiet. "We started with 70 ships 6 hours ago." 6 hours? That was all it took for the Hegemony to destroy most of the human fleet. Chen remembered when the battle started. She thought they had a chance. The human ships were fast and the crews were brave. But the enemy was too strong. Their weapons were too powerful. Their shields were too thick. "Ma'am," called out Ensign Park from the communications station, "the colony is calling us again." Chen walked over to Park's station. The young woman looked up at her with worried eyes. Chen pressed a button and heard the voice of Governor Williams from the planet below. "Admiral Chen, please respond. We have 3 million people down here. The evacuation ships are all destroyed. We need help." Chen picked up the communication device. "Governor, we are doing everything we can. Admiral, our sensors show enemy ships moving toward the planet. They are going to attack us soon." Chen knew this was true. The Hegemony always did the same thing. First, they destroyed the defending fleet. Then they killed everyone on the planet. They had done this to 20 human colonies already. They never left anyone alive. "We will protect you, Governor," Chen said, but she knew it was probably a lie. How could 14 damaged ships protect a whole planet? Chen walked back to the center of the bridge. She looked at her tactical officer, Commander Rodriguez. He was a good man who had been with her for 5 years. "What are our options?" she asked him. Rodriguez looked at his screens. "Admiral, we are almost out of missiles. Our main guns are at 30% power. Most of our ships have holes in their hulls. The enemy still has 200 ships, and they are all in good condition." Chen nodded. She had expected this answer. "How long before enemy reinforcements arrive?" 2 hours, ma'am. Our scouts reported a second enemy fleet coming through hyperspace. 2 hours. After that, there would be 400 enemy ships instead of 200. Chen felt sick in her stomach. She had failed. She had failed her crew, the colony, and all of humanity. "Admiral," said a new voice. It was Captain Morrison from the ship Braveheart. His face appeared on the communication screen. He looked as tired as Chen felt. "The enemy commander is sending us a message." "Put him through," Chen said. The screen changed. Now it showed an alien face. The creature had gray skin, 4 eyes, and no nose. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "Human Admiral," the alien said. "I am Commander Vex of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. You have fought well, but you have lost. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick. Continue fighting, and I will make sure your people suffer for many days before they die." Chen stared at the alien face. She had seen pictures of what the Hegemony did to prisoners. It was horrible, but she also knew that surrender meant the death of 3 million innocent people on the planet below. "Commander Vex," Chen said. "Humans, do not surrender." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then you will all die slowly. I will start with your planet. My ships will burn every city. Your people will beg for death before I am finished." The screen went black. Chen looked around the bridge. Her crew was looking at her, waiting for orders. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. That was what humans did. Even when they were going to lose, they fought. Chen was about to order the fleet to attack when something strange happened. Ensign Park started pressing buttons on her communication station very fast. "Ma'am," Park said. Her voice was excited. "I am getting something strange on the deep space sensors." "What kind of something?" Chen asked. "Ships, Admiral. Coming out of hyperspace at jump point 7. Chen felt her heart beat faster. "Enemy reinforcements?" "No, ma'am. The IFF codes. They say they are human ships, but they are not from any colony I know." Chen ran to Park's station. On the sensor screen, She could see new dots appearing. They were coming from the edge of the solar system, from the direction of deep space. The computer was trying to identify the ships, but it kept showing error messages. How many ships? Chen asked. 30, Admiral, but they look different. Chen watched the screen. The new ships were moving fast toward the battle. As they got closer, the computer was able to show pictures of them. Chen gasped. The ships looked human, but they were strange. Their hulls were covered with scars and strange metal patches. Some had parts that looked like they came from alien ships. Ma'am, Park said. The lead ship is calling us. Put them through. A new face appeared on the communication screen. It was a human, man with gray hair and scars on his face. His eyes were hard and cold like he had seen terrible things. Behind him, Chen could see a bridge that looked like it was built from pieces of different ships. This is Captain Marcus Sullivan of the HMS Perseverance, the man said. Admiral Chen, I assume? Yes, Captain. Where did you come from? We have no record of your ships. Sullivan smiled, but it was not a happy smile. We are the Lost Fleet, Admiral. We left Earth 20 years ago to start a colony in the Andromeda sector. We got lost along the way. Ran into some trouble. It took us a long time to find our way home. Chen stared at him. The Lost Fleet was a legend. Everyone thought they had died in deep space years ago. Captain Sullivan, Chen said, we are fighting for our lives here. The enemy has us outnumbered 10-1. Sullivan looked at something off-screen. Then he looked back at Chen. His eyes were like ice. Admiral, he said. We did not crawl through hell just to watch our species die. We are here to help. Chen felt something she had not felt in hours. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The Lost Fleet was coming home. Captain Marcus Sullivan looked at his bridge crew. These men and women had been through hell with him. Their faces were hard and scarred. Their clothes were patched and worn. But their eyes burned with determination. They had fought monsters in the dark between stars. They had survived when everyone else would have died. Helm, Sullivan said to his pilot, take us into the battle zone. All ships, follow our lead. Sir, said his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Hayes. The enemy has 200 ships. We only have 30. Sullivan smiled. It was not a nice smile. Hayes, we have been fighting things worse than these gray-skinned bastards for 15 years. We know how to hurt people who think they are stronger than us. On the main screen, Sullivan could see the human fleet that was dying. Admiral Chen's ships were brave, but they were using old tactics. They were fighting like this was a normal war. Sullivan knew better. There was no such thing as a fair fight when your species was about to die. Sir, said his communications officer. Admiral Chen wants to know our battle plan. Tell her to watch and learn, Sullivan said. The Lost Fleet moved through space like hunting wolves. Their ships did not look like normal human ships anymore. 20 years of fighting in deep space had changed them. Sullivan's ship, the HMS Perseverance, had armor made from the hull of an alien dreadnought they had killed near the Magellanic Clouds. The weapons were human designs, but they used power cores stolen from a dead civilization they had found floating in the void. Sir, Hayes said, enemy ships are turning toward us. They think we are easy targets. Sullivan laughed. It was a cold sound. Let them come. All ships, prepare for Wolfpack Alpha. On my mark. The hegemony ships moved toward the Lost Fleet in a perfect line. They were confident. They had been winning this battle for hours. What could 30 more human ships do? They were about to find out. Mark, Sullivan said quietly. The Lost Fleet disappeared. The hegemony commander Vex stared at his screens in confusion. The 30 human ships had just vanished. His sensors showed nothing but empty space where they had been a second before. Where did they go? Vex demanded from his bridge crew. Unknown, Commander, his tactical officer said. They seem to have jumped away. Cowards, Vex said. Track them. When they return, we will destroy them quickly. But the Lost Fleet had not jumped away. They had jumped into the middle of the enemy formation. Sullivan's ship appeared directly behind a hegemony cruiser. At point-blank range, his weapons tore through the enemy's shields and hull like paper. The alien ship exploded in a ball of fire. All around the enemy fleet, the Lost Fleet ships appeared like ghosts. They fired their weapons, destroyed enemy ships, then vanished again before the hegemony could fight back. What is this? Vex screamed. How are they doing this? His science officer looked terrified. Commander, they are using some kind of micro-jump technology. They stay in hyperspace for only a few seconds, then return to normal space in a new location. Vex had never seen anything like it. Normal ships could not jump so quickly and so accurately. The calculations alone should take minutes, but these human ships were jumping in and out of hyperspace like it was nothing. On the HMS Perseverance, Sullivan watched his crew work. His navigator, Petty Officer Kim, was handling the micro-jumps. With skill that came from years of practice, she had learned this technique while they were escaping from the Void Hunters in the Outer Rim. Back then, it was the only way to survive. "Good work, Kim," Sullivan said. "Take us behind that dreadnought." The ship jumped again. In 1 second, they were behind a hegemony battleship. Sullivan's weapons officer, Chief Gonzalez, fired everything they had. The enemy ship's engines exploded and it started spinning out of control. "Jump us out," Sullivan ordered. They vanished again, appearing 2 kilometers away. The damaged enemy ship crashed into another hegemony vessel. Both ships were destroyed. "Admiral," Chen watched from her bridge with amazement. The lost fleet was fighting like nothing she had ever seen. They appeared, attacked, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. It was like watching ghosts fight. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Torres said, "the enemy is losing ships fast. They have lost 30 ships in 5 minutes. Chen could hardly believe it. Her fleet had been fighting for hours and barely hurt the enemy. The lost fleet was destroying them. "Admiral," Captain Sullivan's voice came over the communications. "We need your ships to do something for us." "What do you need, Captain?" "We need you to attack the enemy fleet from the front. Make them think you are desperate. Make them focus on you." Chen understood. "You want us to be the bait?" "Yes. We will hit them from behind while they are distracted." Chen looked at her crew. They were ready. "All ships," she said over the fleet channel. "Attack formation. We are going to ram them down their throats." The surviving human ships moved forward. They looked desperate and beaten. The hegemony ships turned to face them. Thinking this was a last hopeless attack, that was exactly what Sullivan wanted. "All ships," Sullivan said to his fleet. "The enemy is looking the wrong way. Hit them with everything." The lost fleet appeared, all around the hegemony formation. This time they did not jump away quickly. They stayed and fought, using weapons that no human ship should have. Sullivan's ship fired something that looked like lightning. It jumped from one enemy ship to another, burning through their hulls. Hayes had built that weapon from the remains of an energy being they had fought in the Perseus arm. Another lost fleet ship fired missiles that seemed to think for themselves. They dodged enemy fire and found weak spots in the alien armor. These were AI weapons, built from the computer core of a machine civilization that had tried to kill them near the galactic edge. The battle became chaos. Enemy ships exploded everywhere. The perfect hegemony formation fell apart as their ships tried to fight enemies that appeared and disappeared like nightmares. Commander Vex watched his fleet die around him. These humans were not fighting like humans. They were fighting like the monsters his people told stories about. They were using weapons and tactics that should not exist. "Commander," his tactical officer said, "we have lost 60 ships. Our formation is breaking apart." Vex felt fear for the first time in his life. The hegemony had conquered 50 systems. They had destroyed dozens of species. They had never lost a battle. But they had never fought humans who had been to hell and back. "All ships," Vex said. "Retreat to safe distance. Call for reinforcements immediately." But Sullivan was not going to let them retreat. "All ships," he said to the lost fleet. "They are trying to run. Do not let them escape. Show them what happens when someone tries to hurt our people." The lost fleet pursued the retreating enemy ships. They had learned to hunt in the dark places between stars. The hegemony ships were just more prey. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in hours, the humans were winning. The space around Kepler 442b had become a graveyard of broken ships. Pieces of metal floated everywhere, glowing red from explosions. The hegemony had lost over 80 ships, but they still had more than 100 left. Commander Vex was angry and scared. No one had ever hurt his fleet this badly. "Bring in the Devastator-class ships," Vex ordered. "I want these humans crushed." 3 massive ships moved forward from the back of the enemy fleet. Each one was twice as big as anything the humans had. Their hulls were black and covered with weapon ports. These were the ships the hegemony used to destroy planets. Captain Sullivan saw them coming on his sensors. He had seen ships like these before, in the dark regions beyond known space. The creatures that built them had tried to eat his crew. It had not ended well for the creatures. "Hayes," Sullivan said to his tactical officer, "what do you think of Those big ones. Hayes looked at his screens and smiled. It was the kind of smile that scared enemy prisoners. Sir, they look slow and stupid, just like the world eaters we fought in the void. Sullivan nodded. The Lost Fleet had learned many things during their long journey home. One of those things was that the biggest ship was not always the strongest ship. Sometimes being big just made you an easier target. Kim, Sullivan said to his navigator, can you put us inside the big one's shields? Kim looked at her calculations. Yes, sir. But we will be very close to their hull. If something goes wrong, we will crash. Something is always going wrong, Sullivan said. That is why we are still alive. Do it. The HMS Perseverance disappeared from normal space. For a few seconds, it traveled through hyperspace. Then it appeared inside the shield bubble of the biggest hegemony ship, only 50 meters from the hull. The aliens on the enemy ship had no time to react. Sullivan's weapons fired at point-blank range, cutting through the armor like butter. Explosions ran along the hull as the ship's power systems overloaded. But Sullivan was not done. Ram them, he ordered. Sir? His helmsman asked. You heard me. Ram them. Full speed. The Perseverance accelerated toward the enemy ship. Its reinforced nose, built from the bones of a space whale they had killed in the outer dark, smashed through the alien hull. The Lost Fleet ship tore through the enemy's bridge section like a bullet through paper. The massive hegemony ship broke in half. Both pieces spun away, leaking air and bodies into space. But the Perseverance was badly damaged, too. Alarms were going off everywhere. Half the crew was injured. Sir? Hayes said, blood running down his face. Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. We are losing air. Can we still fight? Sullivan asked. Yes, sir, but we cannot take much more damage. Sullivan looked at his crew. They were hurt, but they were not giving up. That was what he expected. These people had survived things that would have killed anyone else. A little damage was not going to stop them. All Lost Fleet ships, Sullivan said over the radio. The enemy is scared now. Hit them harder. The other Lost Fleet ships heard their captain and attacked with even more fury. They had weapons that the hegemony had never seen before. Energy beams that could cut through any armor. Missiles that could think and hunt. Fighters that moved like living creatures. One Lost Fleet ship, the Retribution, fired something that looked like a small black hole. The weapon hit a hegemony cruiser and seemed to eat it from the inside out. In 10 seconds, the enemy ship was gone, consumed by artificial gravity. Another ship, the Vengeance, released a swarm of tiny robots. The robots swarmed over enemy ships and started taking them apart piece by piece. The aliens tried to shoot the robots, but there were too many of them. Admiral Chen watched from her bridge with amazement and fear. The Lost Fleet was using technology. That seemed impossible. Where had they gotten these weapons, ma'am? Lieutenant Torres said. Captain Sullivan is calling. Sullivan's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired and bloody, but his eyes were still hard. Admiral, we need to coordinate our attack. The enemy is bringing up their heavy ships. Chen looked at her tactical display. More hegemony ships were moving forward. These were their strongest vessels, the ones they used to destroy entire fleets. Captain, what do you suggest? Your ships attack from the left. Draw their fire. We will hit them from the right and above. But Admiral, Sullivan paused. Some of my ships are badly damaged. We might not all make it through this. Chen understood. The Lost Fleet was winning, but they were paying a terrible price. Several of their ships were already drifting, too damaged to fight. Captain, Chen said, we will do our part. The human fleet split into 2 groups. Chen's ships moved to the left, firing everything they had at the enemy. The hegemony ships turned to face them, thinking this was the main attack. They were wrong. The Lost Fleet appeared above and behind the enemy formation, but this time they did something no one expected. Instead of jumping away after attacking, they stayed and fought like normal ships. But they were not normal ships anymore. The Nightmare, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, had been rebuilt with armor from a crystal, creature they had killed in the Magellanic Void. Enemy weapons barely scratched it. Its own weapons were powered by exotic matter that should not exist. When it fired, enemy ships simply vanished. The Prometheus had engines that bent space around them. It could move in ways that made no sense, turning and accelerating like it ignored the laws of physics. The hegemony ships could not hit it, but it could hit them from impossible angles. But the most terrifying ship was the Defiant. During their journey, it had been infected by some kind of alien technology that was partly alive. The ship could repair itself and change its shape during battle. When enemy weapons hit it, it adapted and became immune to that type of weapon. Commander, Vex watched his fleet being torn apart by impossible enemies. These humans had become something else during their time in the dark. They fought like demons from his people's worst nightmares. All ships, Vex ordered. Focus fire on the damaged human vessels. Destroy them quickly. The hegemony fleet concentrated their weapons on the most damaged Lost Fleet ships. The Retribution took dozens of hits and started to break apart. The Vengeance was surrounded by enemy fighters and could not escape. But the Lost Fleet had learned something important during their long journey. Never leave anyone behind. All ships, Sullivan said. Protect the wounded. Form up on me. The remaining Lost Fleet ships moved to defend their damaged companions. They fought with desperate fury, knowing that every second counted. Ship after ship was destroyed, both human and alien. The Retribution finally exploded, taking an enemy dreadnought with it. Captain Maria Santos had rammed her dying ship into the alien vessel at full speed. Her last words over the radio were, "For humanity." The Vengeance went next. Captain John Harrison had held off 50 enemy fighters while his crew evacuated to other ships. He stayed behind to make sure they all escaped safely. Sullivan felt each loss like a knife in his heart. These people had followed him through hell. They had trusted him to bring them home. Now they were dying to protect strangers who lived in the system they had left 20 years ago. But that was what humans did. They protected each other even when it meant death. "Sir," Hayes said, "the enemy is calling for more reinforcements. Long-range sensors show another fleet approaching." Sullivan looked at his tactical display. The second enemy fleet would arrive in 1 hour. His fleet was down to 15 ships, and most of those were damaged. But they had hurt the hegemony badly. Of the 200 ships that had started the battle, only 70 were still fighting. The rest were destroyed or so damaged they had withdrawn. "Hayes," Sullivan said, "how many enemy ships can we kill in 1 hour?" Hayes smiled despite the blood on his face. "All of them, sir, if we are lucky." "Then let's get lucky," Sullivan said. The battle was far from over, but the hegemony was learning something they had never learned before. Humans do not give up, no matter how bad things get. And when humans have nothing left to lose, they become the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The battle had been raging for 8 hours. Space around the planet was filled with the wreckage of destroyed ships. The Lost Fleet was down to 12 ships, but they had reduced the hegemony fleet to only 40 vessels. Both sides were exhausted and desperate. Commander Vex stood on his bridge staring at the tactical display. He had never seen anything like these humans. They fought with weapons that should not exist, and tactics that made no sense. Worst of all, they never gave up, even when they were clearly beaten. "Commander," his science officer said, "the second fleet will arrive in 30 minutes. Vex nodded. When the reinforcements arrived, he would have 200 fresh ships against 12 damaged human vessels. The battle would finally be over. But he had learned to respect these strange humans. They might try something desperate in the time they had left. He was right. On the HMS Perseverance, Captain Sullivan looked at his remaining crew. Half of them were wounded. The ship was holding together with emergency repairs and pure stubbornness. But they were still alive, and they were still fighting. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Hayes said, "long-range sensors confirm enemy reinforcements approaching. We have maybe 25 minutes before they arrive." Sullivan nodded. He had been expecting this. The question was, what could 12 ships do against 200? "Hayes," Sullivan said, "what is the status of the gravity mine?" Hayes looked surprised. "Sir, it is still in the cargo bay, but we agreed never to use it unless we had no choice," Sullivan finished. "I think we are there." The gravity mine was something the Lost Fleet had found during their journey home. It was a weapon left behind by an ancient civilization that had destroyed itself in a war millions of years ago. The mine could create a temporary black hole that would suck in everything within a large area. The Lost Fleet had kept it as a last resort, because using it was almost certainly suicide for whoever deployed it. The mine had to be placed manually, and the ship that carried it would probably not escape the gravity field. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "if we use the mine, we might not make it out." Sullivan looked at his crew. These people had followed him through 20 years of hell. They had fought monsters and survived impossible battles. They deserved better than dying in a suicide attack. But below them was a planet with 3 million innocent people. People who had never chosen to be part of this war. People who would be slaughtered if the hegemony won. Hayes, Sullivan said, send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell her to gather all remaining human ships and retreat to minimum safe distance. Sir, we are going to use the mine, but first, we need to make sure all the enemy ships are in one place. Sullivan turned to address his entire crew over the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we are going to do something very dangerous. We are going to use the gravity mine to destroy the enemy fleet. Some of us might not survive this. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship can do so now. Sullivan waited. No one moved. No one asked to leave. Sir, said Petty Officer Kim from the helm station. Where do you want us to take this bucket of bolts? Sullivan smiled. These people were the bravest humans he had ever known. Take us right into the middle of the enemy fleet, as close as you can get. Admiral Chen received Sullivan's message with growing horror. She understood what he was planning to do. The gravity mine would destroy the enemy fleet, but it would also destroy the ship that deployed it. Ma'am, Lieutenant Torres said. Captain Sullivan is ordering all human ships to retreat. Negative, Chen said. We stay and fight with them. Admiral, if we stay close, the mine will destroy us too. Chen looked at her crew. They were ready to die alongside the lost fleet. But she knew Sullivan was right. Someone needed to survive. To protect the colony. All ships, Chen said over the fleet channel. Fall back to 5,000 kilometers. Maintain long-range fire support. The human ships began to retreat. But they continued firing at the enemy, trying to keep the hegemony. Ships focused on them. Commander Vex watched the human retreat with satisfaction. Finally, the stubborn humans were giving up. His remaining ships moved forward to pursue them, clustering together to concentrate their firepower. This was exactly what Sullivan wanted. The HMS Perseverance flew straight toward the center of the hegemony formation. Enemy ships fired everything they had at the lone human vessel, but somehow it kept flying. Its shields were failing, its hull was cracked, but it would not stop. Sir, Hayes said, hull breaches on all decks. We are losing life support. How much longer do we need? Sullivan asked. 2 more minutes to reach optimal deployment position. Sullivan looked around his bridge. His crew was working calmly, even though they all knew they were probably going to die. The air was getting thin as life support failed. Emergency lights flickered on and off. Kim, Sullivan said, can you get us closer? I can get us right on top of them, sir. Do it. The Perseverance accelerated toward the largest hegemony ship. Enemy weapons hit it again and again, but it kept flying. The ship's AI, modified with alien technology during their long journey, was rerouting power and making repairs faster than the enemy could cause damage. Sir, Hayes said, we are in position, deploying the mine. The gravity mine launched from the Perseverance's cargo bay. It was a small dark sphere that seemed to bend light around it. As soon as it was deployed, it began to activate. All crew, Sullivan said over the ship's communication system. Brace for emergency jump. Kim, get us out of here. But as the ship tried to jump to hyperspace, the gravity mine activated. Space around it began to twist and bend. The hegemony ships closest to the mine were caught in its pull and began to stretch like rubber. Commander Vex felt his ship shaking as impossible forces grabbed it. On his screens, he could see other ships being pulled toward a point in space that was darker than anything he had ever seen. What is that thing? He screamed. His science officer looked terrified. Commander, it appears to be some kind of artificial singularity. It is creating a gravity field stronger than a neutron star. One by one, the hegemony ships were pulled into the gravity mine. Their hulls stretched and broke apart as they fell into the artificial black hole. Some ships tried to escape, but the gravity was too strong. The HMS Perseverance was caught in the edge of the gravity field. The ship's hull was groaning under the stress, and several sections had already broken off. Sir, Kim said, fighting with the controls. I cannot break free. The gravity is too strong. Sullivan looked at his crew one last time. It has been an honor, serving with all of you. But then something unexpected happened. The other lost fleet ships appeared around the Perseverance. They had jumped back into the danger zone to save their flagship. Captain, came a voice over the radio. It was Captain Rodriguez from the Nightmare. We are not leaving you behind. The lost fleet ships fired cables and tractor beams at the Perseverance. Working together, they began to pull their flagship away from the gravity mine. It was dangerous work. 2 more ships were caught by the artificial black hole and destroyed, but they managed to save Sullivan and his crew. The remaining Lost Fleet ships jumped to safety just as the gravity mine collapsed in on itself, taking the last of the hegemony ships with it. When the mine finally disappeared, the space around the planet was empty except for floating debris. The entire enemy fleet was gone, destroyed by a weapon from a dead civilization. Sullivan sat in his captain's chair, breathing hard. They had done it. They had saved the colony and destroyed the enemy fleet. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 30 ships that had arrived to save humanity, only 9 were left. "Sir," Hayes said, "the enemy reinforcements are arriving." Sullivan looked at his screens. 200 fresh hegemony ships were coming out of hyperspace. They would see the destroyed fleet and realize what had happened. They would be angry and scared. But Sullivan was not worried anymore. He had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humans do not give up, and they do not abandon each other. The lost fleet had come home. Now it was time to teach the galaxy what that meant. The second hegemony fleet came out of hyperspace expecting to see the final destruction of the human colony. Instead, they found empty space filled with the wreckage of 200 of their own ships. Commander Krall, leader of the reinforcement fleet, stared at his screens in disbelief. "What happened here?" Krall demanded from his bridge crew. "Sir," his tactical officer said with a shaking voice, "it appears the entire Fourth Fleet has been destroyed. We are detecting human ship signatures, but only a few vessels." Krall could not believe it. The Fourth Fleet was one of their strongest. It had never lost a battle. How could a handful of human ships destroy 200 hegemony vessels? "Show me the human ships," Krall ordered. On his screen appeared 9 damaged human vessels. They looked like they had been through hell. Their hulls were cracked and burning, but they were still flying, still fighting. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable looking at the new enemy fleet. She was exhausted, and her ship was barely holding together. Around her, the surviving coalition ships were in even worse condition. They had maybe a dozen missiles left between all of them. But next to them flew the 9 remaining ships of the lost fleet. These vessels looked like nightmares built from scrap metal and alien technology. Their hulls were scarred from battles across the galaxy, but their weapons were still working and their crews were still ready to fight. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres said, "the Lost Fleet commander is calling." Captain Sullivan's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, and there was dried blood on his forehead. Behind him, his bridge was dark and filled with smoke. But his eyes were still hard as steel. "Admiral Chen," Sullivan said, "we have company." Chen looked at her tactical display. 200 fresh enemy ships against 9 damaged human vessels. The odds were even worse than before. "Captain," Chen said, "we cannot win this fight. We should evacuate the colony while we can." Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was not afraid either. "Admiral," Sullivan said, "we spent 20 years fighting our way home through the darkest parts of the galaxy. We fought things that would give the hegemony nightmares. We lost good people every step of the way. Do you know why?" Chen waited. "Because this is our home," Sullivan continued. "These are our people. And when someone threatens your home, you do not run away. You make them sorry they ever came here." Chen felt something stir in her chest. It was the same feeling she had felt when she first joined the Space Navy. The feeling that some things were worth dying for. "What do you propose, Captain?" she asked. Sullivan looked at something off-screen, then back at Chen. "We have one advantage the enemy does not know about. We have something they will never understand." "What is that?" "We have each other." Commander Krall decided to end this quickly. He had seen what these strange human ships could do, and he did not want to take any chances. "All ships," Krall ordered. "Target the colony below. If we cannot defeat these ships in battle, we will destroy what they are protecting." The hegemony fleet began to move toward the planet, their weapons powered up, ready to burn every city and kill every person on the surface. But the human ships moved to block their path. "You want to hurt our people?" Sullivan said over an open channel so all the enemy ships could hear. "You will have to go through us first." What happened next became a legend that spread across the galaxy. 9 human ships attacked 200 alien vessels. They should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, they fought like demons from the deepest hell. The HMS Perseverance used its damaged jump drive to appear inside the enemy formation. At point-blank range, it fired weapons that tore through alien hulls like paper. When its missiles ran out, it rammed enemy ships with its reinforced nose. The nightmare used its crystal armor to absorb enemy fire, then reflected the energy back as devastating beams of light. Enemy ships that shot at it found their own weapons, turned against them. The Prometheus moved in ways that defied physics, turning and accelerating like it was dancing between the stars. Enemy gunners could not track it as it struck again and again from impossible angles. Admiral Chen's ships joined the attack. The Indomitable and its sister ships fired their last missiles and charged their last weapons. When those ran out, they used their ships as battering rams. The battle was chaos. Human ships exploded as enemy fire overwhelmed them. But for every human ship destroyed, they took 10 enemy vessels with them. Commander Krall watched his fleet being torn apart by enemies that refused to die. These humans fought with a fury he had never seen before. They protected each other, sacrificed themselves for strangers, and never gave up no matter how hopeless things looked. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "we have lost 60 ships. The humans are using suicide tactics." Krall felt fear creeping into his mind. His people had conquered 50 star systems. They had destroyed dozens of species, but they had never fought anyone like these humans. "All ships," Krall ordered, "fall back to safe distance, call for more reinforcements." But Sullivan was not going to let them escape. "All human ships," he said over the radio, "they are trying to run. Do not let them regroup." The surviving human vessels pursued the retreating hegemony fleet. There were only 4 human ships left, but they fought like they were still at full strength. The HMS Perseverance, now held together by emergency force fields and the will of its crew, caught up to Krall's command ship. Sullivan's weapons were gone, his shields were down, but he still had one thing left. "Hayes," Sullivan said to his tactical officer, "prepare for ramming speed." "Sir," Hayes said, "if we ram them, we will not survive." Sullivan looked around his bridge at his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy. They had fought monsters and survived impossible odds. They deserved better than dying in a suicide attack. But sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to sacrifice everything for it. "All hands," Sullivan said over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. Anyone who wants to evacuate to another ship, do it now." No one moved. No one left their stations. "Sir," said Petty Officer Kim from the helm station, "where do you want me to take us?" Sullivan pointed at the enemy command ship. "Right through their bridge." The HMS Perseverance accelerated toward Krall's ship. The alien commander watched in horror as the damaged human vessel came straight at him. He ordered his ships to fire everything they had at the approaching enemy. But it was too late. The Perseverance smashed through the hegemony command ship like a meteor. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. Captain Marcus Sullivan and his crew died as they had lived, fighting to protect humanity. The remaining hegemony ships fled into hyperspace. They had lost their commander and over half their fleet. The survivors carried news back to their empire. Humanity was not weak prey to be easily conquered. They were dangerous predators who would fight to the death for their people. Admiral Chen sat in her damaged ship, looking at the empty space where the Perseverance had been. The lost fleet was gone. These brave people had traveled across the galaxy to save a world they had never seen, to protect people they had never met. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Torres said quietly, "we are getting calls from across human space. Word of the battle is spreading. Every colony, every ship, every human who can fight is asking for orders." Chen smiled for the first time in days. The lost fleet had done more than save one colony. They had shown humanity what they could become when they stood together. They had shown the galaxy that humans do not surrender, do not abandon each other, and do not back down from any fight. The battle was over. The colony was safe. But the war was just beginning. And now the galaxy would learn what happened when you made humanity angry. The lost fleet had come home. Their sacrifice would be remembered forever, and their example would inspire humans across the stars to fight back against any enemy who threatened their people. The battle was nearly over. Then humans came to turn the tide, and the galaxy would never be the same again.